Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. O God, lead me from the unreal to what is real. Lead me from darkness to light. Please lead me from death to immortality. May there be peace, peace, peace everywhere. Now that the prayer is over, I would like to start giving the talk on the subject which I have already announced. The subject is how to get rid of superstitions. What is a superstition? Superstition is belief in what is not proved to be true. That is superstition. And there could be many different kinds of such superstition, such as religious superstition, social superstition, political superstition, scientific superstition, even medical superstition. There could be superstitions in all these areas. And superstitions are very ancient. Even when the human beings were in a primitive state, they had superstitions. Now that we are no longer primitive, we consider ourselves very civilized. We also have superstitions. All right, I will discuss some of these superstitions. Then I will tell you how to get rid of all superstitions. Let me first talk about religious superstition. In the primitive age, our ancestors had belief in many things which were not proved to be true. Some of them will go up to the top of the hill and look around, and then they could see the horizon which was round. So it appeared to them that the earth was like a disc, round disc. And then many of their friends and people whom they knew, they died. And their bodies were destroyed. But very strange, when these people would have the dreams, they could see those dead people in their dreams in perfect shape. Then they decided that death is not the end. After death, people go on existing. And they regain their bodies, etc. And people who would have such dreams, they would interact with these dead people in their dreams, and the dead people appear to be alive. But when they would wake up, then they would see that those people were not there anymore. They started wondering, where have they gone? They were there in the dream world, but now where have they gone? Then some of them noticed a high-flying bird, such as an eagle, flying higher and higher and higher. And as it flies higher and higher, it becomes smaller and smaller. And eventually it becomes invisible. So that's why they concluded that there must be a world up there which is invisible. There, They're high and high, high up. And that's why they're invisible. That world is invisible. And that world they call heaven. So people, when they die, they go to heaven. That's what was their conclusion. And some of them noticed that there are some people who are very bad-natured and everything. And they thought, would they also go to heaven? Then they thought that there must be another world underground. It will be dark and dismal and smelly. And that's where all those people will go. That's what they thought. These are all superstitions anyway. This concept of heaven and hell, and the dark region they call hell, and high up was a region which was heaven. So the earth was flat. That's what they thought, like a disc. And after many years in that subcontinent which we call India, there were some thinkers. They did not have to strive too much for food, because there was abundance of food there. Climate was very pleasant, and they would have time to lie down and think. They would lie down under the tree and they had time to think. That's how that thinking gradually helped them to know certain things. So there is a book in India which has a chapter called Goladhyaya. That is about the roundness of things, that chapter dealt with. And there is a sentence there written in Sanskrit. Karatala kalita amalakabat amalam vidanti ye golam. The earth is like a myrobalan fruit. In case you don't know what a myrobalan is, it is called amalaki fruit. It is very rich in vitamin C. It is abundantly available in India. It is a fruit like a plum. So this sentence is saying that this earth is spherical like that myrobalan fruit which is on your palm. It is not flat. So the earth was spherical, that idea came. Then the idea of heaven and hell was in trouble. Where was hell and where was heaven? The earth was spherical. In any case, ideas kept on changing. And then many years later, in a holy book of Hinduism called Katha Upanishad, we read, Yadidam kincha jagat sarvam prana ejati nisritam. What does it mean? Whatever exists in this world has come out of cosmic energy and it is vibrating. Everything is vibrating. It is very much like what the physicists sometimes may accept. Everything is at a certain frequency of vibration. And there are many such planes of existence. Each of them is called a loka. They have different frequencies of vibration. Our eyes and other organisms, sense organs, they can only get to know what is vibrating in this world. But there are other worlds with different frequencies of vibration. So these sense organs are unable to know the existence of this world or experience the existence of this world, of those worlds. So the idea of heaven and hell disappeared. They are considered superstition, ancient ideas. And in the scriptures of Hinduism, we read about Sura and Asura. Some people who have very good tendencies, and they would be called Sura. Some others who lack such tendencies, they would be called Asura. And in the scripture which is called Rig Veda in Hinduism, sometimes Asura means divinity also. But later on, Asura started meaning something which is opposed to divinity. And Sura was something which was divine. The word Sur means to shine. So those were Suras, they would shine as the light would come out of them. And Asuras, they did not have that light. Just as in this country, sometimes you tell a boy, shine in life. So that same idea was there at that time. And this concept eventually went to Babylon, because the people who lived in that subcontinent, India, they are called Aryas. Arya means noble people. They used to think that they were noble, or the purpose of life was to become noble. The husband would be addressed by the wife as Aryaputra, the son of a noble person. The husband had the potential to become noble. So this Aryan civilization spread far and wide. It went to what we call nowadays Iran, and it went all over Asia. It went to Southeast Asia also. Some of these Aryans used to live on the bank of the river Indus, which used to be called Sindhu. Sindhu means ocean. That is, that river most probably in its mouth was so wide that it seemed to be like ocean. That's how the name came, most probably, Sindhu. And some Aryans used to, who are called Aryas, or they're in English Aryans, they lived on the bank of that river. And some other Aryans, they would call themselves by the name of the river, Sindhu, and then they started calling them Hindu. That's how the word Hinduism came. Hinduism was created by the British when they ruled India for more than 200 years. Like Judaism, communism, Hinduism. But the ancestors of the Hindus didn't even know this word Hindu or Hinduism. Some Indo-Aryans who were in the country which we call Iran today, that was in ancient times, there was a place called Babylon. So they were there. And they would sometimes use the word Asura, they pronounce it as Ahura. Ahura. Then Ahura Mazda means God. Ahura Man means the opposite of God. You may call it the devil if you want. So they invented these two words. And the ancient Jews, they were in captivity in Babylon, some of them. And they learnt that word Ahura Man. Then they called it devil. That's how the idea of devil came to Judaism. It's very interesting. And the idea of God, that God can be angry, the wrathful God, that was considered true, but it was a superstition. How can God be angry? Anger is caused by an obstacle which is on the way to the fulfillment of some desire for sense pleasure. God does not have any such thing. How can God be angry? But the idea of a wrathful God came. God will become angry if I do this. That's how people started thinking. These are superstitions. And in the West, particularly in the West, such as a country in America, the Friday the 13th is very inauspicious. That's why I have heard that in some hotels in this country, room number 13 is not there. So, something auspicious and inauspicious. These ideas were there not only in this country, but in other countries also, such as India. They would talk about auspicious time, inauspicious time, and depending on the positions of stars and planets. And they had come to know some of the planets, but in others, or they were believers in astrology. And also there are some believers in palmistry. When I was a young man, I was a voracious reader of books, and I had great craving to know things. At that time, I studied astrology and also palmistry. And so many people would bring their nativity charts to me to say what was there in their charts. And palmistry also, the lines by that, to judge their future and all that. Then I discovered after a while that none of these two subjects was reliable. Then I thought, when I was a young man, I went to a dentist. One of my teeth had to be extracted. And then bleeding was there. To stop that bleeding, it took quite some time. That's why some friend said to my parents, the planet Mars must be angry with him. That's why he had bleeding. So, get a piece of coral rock, small piece, and make a ring in which this coral stone, little piece of coral stone will be there. And that will prevent the wrath of the planet Mars. So I started using it. And then a time came when I understood that it was useless, because the stars and planets, why should we depend on them? They are governed by God. They are under the control of God. So why not I go to God? Why do I depend on the servants? This thought came to my mind. So I gave up my belief in astrology and palmistry and all these stones which will please the planners which have become displeased with some person or some persons. So when I became a monk, then one of my elder sisters came to see me. So I offered that ring to her. I said, will you please take this? And she took that ring. So since then I have not used that ring. I don't believe in all those things. So belief in astrology and palmistry is also a superstition. Now let me talk about a little bit about social superstitions. In India, the people who inhabited that country for many years, they are called Aryas, or as I have told you already, Aryans. That means noble people. And not all people were considered noble. Those who looked a little different from the Aryans, they would be called Anaryas, not noble. And some Aryans would think that they were the human beings, so they were Nara. The Sanskrit word is Nara. And some others, they look like human beings but not quite, so they look at Banara. The word Banara, Sanskrit words have many meanings. One meaning of the word Banara is a monkey. So if you read the epic, the Ramayana, there you will come across a character, Hanuman. The word Hanuman actually means one whose chin is a little more developed. But he was a human being. He was a great hero also and became a great devotee of the divine incarnation Rama. And the Ramayana, the epic, tells us about the heroic story of Rama's life. And Hanuman was a Banara. And there was a king called Ravana. He was not considered very superior. He was very powerful, but was not considered superior. Where the country where he ruled is called Sri Lanka today. Anyway, so all these ideas you find. Some people considering themselves superior to others. Just as here, there are some people who think that they're superior because they're white-skinned, and those who are black-skinned, they're not that superior. White people, black people, then yellow races, all these ideas. Strange. These are all superstitions. And I have read that there is an American Indian tribe here. This tribe used to think that they were the only human beings. All others were not human beings, sub-human beings. And in ancient China also, the Chinese people used to think that any foreigner was a devil. Was not quite human or good. And in India also, similar idea was there, that it is expressed through the word mlecha. Not Aryan, they are mlechas, they are inferior. So these are some of the social superstitions. We all are the same as human beings. And then let me talk about political superstition. We condemn individual selfishness. A selfish person is considered a bad person. Who is a good friend? a friend who makes self-sacrifice for me, who is unselfish. Who is a good husband? A good husband is he who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for his wife. Who is a good wife? A good wife is she who willingly and lovingly makes self-sacrifice for her husband. That means unselfishness is goodness. But individual selfishness is condemned. But strangely enough, group selfishness is condoned. Nationalism is no other than group selfishness, and it is considered great. Nation and national boundaries they create. Did God create those boundaries? Of course not. But people create those boundaries through bloodshed, etc. And they call it the national boundary. This is how human beings behave. These are all superstitions. And the idea of nationalism is the idea of group selfishness. That is not anything great. And also the belief that there is a superstitious belief that any political system will make the world perfect. That's why they tried so many things. Communism was tried, socialism was tried, and they failed. Even the idea of democracy, it looks like it's going to fail. To have perfect democracy is very difficult. In ancient India, there were 10 republics, and they had democracy. They didn't have kings. They are called Ganarajyas. And a person would be selected to govern that country, that's all. And Gautama Buddha was born in such a republic. His father was not a king. He was the chief of that Ganarajya. But anyway, and in politics, there is a saying that what is politics? Politics is poll tricks. During the polls, you trick people and you get elected. That is the view of some. We had monks of the Ramakrishna Order. In India, we never vote during election. We would not go for any politician. And in government of India, their policy is expressed through one sentence. Satyam eva jayate na nitam. Truth alone triumphs, not untruth. That is from our scriptures. And that is the policy of the government, supposed to be. But there was one gentleman named Karan Singh. He used to be a prince in a native state of India. Then after the independence of India, many native states were gone. So this Karan Singh eventually was able to hold a high position in the federal government of India. And he happened to visit our headquarters, Beluru Math, once during a celebration, and he gave a lecture. I was present during that, and I heard him saying, he said that the policy of our government is truth alone is victorious, not untruth. Satyam eva jayate naditam. But what is practice is mithya eva jayate na satyam. That means it is lying which is victorious, and the truthfulness is not. he lamented that. So these are all political superstitions. And there are scientific superstitions as well. Well, I was a student of science among other subjects. And there we read about, any science student reads about molecules. Molecule was considered the smallest substance. Everything had molecules. But later on they discovered that no, something smaller than the molecules is there, that is called an atom. Then eventually they came to know that even smaller than the atoms are quarks, and smaller than quarks is superstring, then a membrane, deep brain, and the vibrations, all these things you read. So ideas keep on changing. Older idea which is not considered true, that becomes a superstition. And also the direction of electric current, it is from positive to negative, that's what is believed, and it is still in science it is accepted. But the truth is that the electric current flows from the opposite direction, from the negative to positive. But it didn't create any mathematical problem or scientific problem. That's why it is still, this superstition is still being retained. Let me talk about medical superstition. There was a disease which killed many. It was called malaria. Quinine had not been developed at that time, I think, or they didn't know that it was an antidote. So malaria, many people who died of malaria. And that's why, what is the word malaria means? Mal means bad, area means air. Bad air. So that disease is caused by bad air. That's what, in those, even in the 19th century, people used to believe in that, and they used to change places. This is not a good place, there is malaria, let us go to another place. In Hindi there is a word hawa badal. Change the air, and then you will go from one place to another place, then you will be healthy. These are all superstitions. There was it was British India at that time, and there was a British family, and they had a son named Ronald. His complete name is Ronald Ross. So Ronald Ross studied in India, and then eventually he was a very good student. He studied medicine, then he went to England to study further. And it is Ronald Ross who discovered that malaria is not caused by bad air. He proved that there is a parasite which is in the intestinal tract of Anopheles mosquitoes, and that parasite is called Plasmodium parasite. Malaria is caused by that parasite. When mosquitoes bite people, then these parasites enter into the people whose bodies have been bitten by mosquitoes. So it is Ronald Ross, who proved that this that parasite in the intestinal tract of Anopheles causes malaria. And he was awarded Nobel Prize in 1902 So ideas keep on changing. One superstition is preceded by another superstition. I had a big brother who was older than me by 12 years. My father wanted him to be a doctor, so he went to the medical school and did very well, came out. Then my father said to him, "I'm giving you money, start your practice." Those are the days when there were many idealistic people in India. It was pre-independence India. And there are some movements to gain independence from the British rule. And one of the famous leaders was Mahatma Gandhi. Yes, his life was an ideal life. So he had many followers, and people in general, many of them were idealists. So my brother said to my father, and he would not disobey my father, but for the first time he said, "No, I will not start practice here." Then my father said, "Why not?" He said, "If I start practicing, then I won't be able to diagnose certain illnesses. Still I have to charge money from the patients. That is unethical. I cannot do that." Then my father was an honest man. He said, "All right then." He said, "What do you want to do?" Then my brother went to the famous school of tropical medicine, which was in Calcutta. And there he studied and he made very brilliant results. And then after that, he worked in the laboratory of Pasteur Institute of the city of Shillong. And he would try to discover parasites under the microscope and all these things. He became a pathologist. And eventually, and I saw my brother when I was a young man, and he used to read a lot of medical journals. So I asked him, "Why do you have to read so many books?" Then he said, he told me, "If I don't read them, then I will become backdated, because they're going to discover newer and newer things," he said. He turned out to be a very good pathologist. He even discovered treatment for curing sickle cell anemia. And his name is mentioned in Google for that. And when my brother, he turned out to be, as I told you, a pathologist, he was perhaps in his 50s. Then he was offered the chair of the principal of the School of Tropical Medicine of Calcutta. But he didn't accept that. He had enough income through his work. So there are medical superstitions. And there is a spiritual superstition. We all suffer from that. That superstition is the belief that we are a body-mind complex. Body. We have body, mind, senses, that's the belief. But this is a superstition according to Vedanta. Vedanta says you are not your body-mind complex, you are divinity, you are beyond it. When I was a young man, then I saw, in the city where I grew up, I saw a wandering holy man seated under a tree and surrounded by some people who were all seated around him. And then with a friend of mine, we also sat there to know what that holy man was doing. And eventually, I I asked the holy man, where do you live? Then he said, I don't live in one place. I wander from one place to another. I stay in one place for about 7 days and then move to another place. That's what he said. Then I said, if you go on wandering, where have you wandered? He said he wandered practically much over North India. Then I said, during your wanderings, if you fall ill, what do you do? Then he said to me, suddenly his eyes flashed and pointing to his body with his finger, he said, pointing to his body, "Are ye to kaya dand hai." That is in Hindi, he said. This body is a cane only. If I am ill, I will not go and see a doctor or anything. I'll just give it up. It is a cane. I am not my body. That his words I remembered. Then when I became a monk, and I used to remember that person, that wandering holy man. Because Vedanta also teaches the same thing. Tattamasi, you are divinity. You are not the body-mind complex. Aham Brahmasmi, I am divinity. I am not the body-mind complex. Everything is divinity. Sarvam Khalidam Brahma. These are the great sentences that we have in the scriptures of Hinduism. Yes, that is the truth. And so we have to give up this superstition that we are the body-mind complex. This superstition has to be given up. And once this is given up, we are divinity. What is greater than divinity? Nothing. Divinity is infinity, eternity, and consciousness. That's what is divinity. Thank you very much for listening to my talk.